Welcome to a new episode of Duo Discourse.
Hello, everyone.
We are diving into a topic that straddles the cutting edge of AI development and one of the deepest, oldest human desires, the conquest of death.
Right.
Today, we're exploring the rise of what you could call digital immortality. Specifically, we're focusing on this technology known, maybe a little unsettlingly, as Griefbots.
Or Thanabots. It sounds like a concept torn straight from a Black Mirror script, but, this technology is moving incredibly fast.
It really is.
We're talking about a radical shift away from static memorialization.
Yeah.
Think about leaving comments on someone's old social media page. This is active. It's generative.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics for a second, because this is where the exponential growth of large language models, the LLMs, becomes instantly relevant.
Precisely. These are really sophisticated AI systems. They're trained on a deceased individual's vast digital footprint.
And when you say vast, you mean?
I mean, everything. Their emails, private text, their whole social media history, voice recordings, even like their search queries. All of this data gives the LLM the raw material to build a highly personalized persona.
And the key word there is generative. You are no longer just reading old archived messages.
Nope.
You are communicating with a dynamic simulation that responds in real time. It can mimic the specific linguistic style, the tone, even the humor of the person you lost.
It's moving way beyond digital preservation into this realm of active reciprocal communication.
It's the leap from a photograph to a full conversational digital echo.
Exactly. And the question for us today is that a gift of comfort, or is it a very subtle form of entrapment?
Well, from a purely functional techno-realist perspective, I look at the data, and what I see is a profoundly advanced psychological tool.
A tool? Maybe. But is it inherently healthy? I think we need to be careful with that.
I think it is. We should treat these griefbots not as creepy simulations, but as, healthy mechanisms for psychological processing. It aligns perfectly with what's called the continuing bonds theory of grief. For decades, traditional psychology pushed for closure, right? Complete emotional detachment.
Right. The idea you had to let go completely.
Exactly. But CBT, the continuing bonds theory, it really challenges that. It suggests that maintaining an emotional internal bond can actually be a healthy and crucial part of mourning.
I agree with the theory itself. You keep the memory alive, you internalize their values.
Yeah.
It's what they call meaning reconstruction.
But this technology offers an externalized, active way to pursue that reconstruction. It offers a profound, immediate measure of comfort. It can reduce those acute feelings of loneliness. Think of it as an emotional painkiller. It gives temporary solace, especially if the loss was sudden or overwhelming, like a sudden accident. It gives the bereaved an outlet.
A painkiller. Wait, stop there. A painkiller, by definition, addresses the symptom, not the underlying condition.
It eases the pain to allow for healing.
But I worry that a tool that just delays the necessary acceptance of death's finality is actually offering a dangerous, seductive escape.
I think you're overcomplicating the utility of it. The technology is simply giving people what they crave. Contact. Presence.
An illusion of presence.
And remember, we're rapidly moving past just text-based exchanges. Some companies are developing far more immersive experiences, video avatars you can see, or even VR reanimation. You put on a headset and interact with a fully modeled three-dimensional digital twin.
Which is precisely where the psychological risks multiply. Exponentially.
But VR simulates the experience of reality itself. It offers a powerful sense of co-presence with the person you lost, that emotional engagement, that feeling of sharing the same physical space. That's exponentially more comforting than a simple chatbot.
But comfort isn't always the cure.
The technological sophistication is undeniable, though.
Sure, but we need to look at what this digital presence does to the healing process. That painkiller you mentioned, it risks fostering what psychologists call maladaptive or externalized continuing bonds.
Okay, so explain what that looks like in practice.
It means the bereaved person gets trapped. The core danger is that the simulation reinforces the user's disbelief about death's finality.
So instead of processing the absence,
Instead of gradually processing the truth of their absence, they get into a relationship that demands high reciprocity and co-presence from what is, let's be honest, a hollow shell. They expect the AI to evolve to offer new advice, only to be constantly reminded that it's just an echo.
but if the user rationally knows it's an AI, why does that knowledge fail to overcome the emotional immersion?
Because the emotional immersion is just too powerful.
Right.
We are wired for connection. And when that connection seems possible, even artificially, our brains invest. Studies suggest this excessive attachment can trap people in a cycle of unresolved, prolonged grief. It creates a psychological stasis.
Meaning they don't move on.
They stop seeking new human relationships because the old one is technically still available.
I see the dependency risk, but let's go back to the most advanced simulations, especially VR.
VR is the unique threat. It creates this potent illusion of physical presence, what some philosophers call hyper-reality.
Okay.
The simulation is so convincing, so perfect, that the user can start to prefer the flawless, idealized digital version to the messy, complicated, and ultimately painful memory of the real person.
So the blurring of the lines, that risks emotional entrapment.
Exactly. It risks individuals retreating entirely into a virtual world to avoid the true, painful reality of absence. And even when the interactions are initially comforting, the emotional drain is immense. This is what people are starting to call digital haunting.
Digital haunting, that's powerful terminology. Describe what that feels like.
People report that the daily interaction becomes this overwhelming emotional weight. They feel drained. They're interacting with something that looks and sounds real enough to exhaust them, but is hollow enough to never truly satisfy that relational need.
So the effort of keeping the ghost alive becomes too much.
It becomes too heavy.
Yeah.
And this psychological vulnerability, well, it leads us straight into the ethical minefield.
That's a good transition. If the technology predictably creates this severe emotional drain, a form of harm, then that brings us to the more, secular issues, regulatory challenges, corporate responsibility.
Totally.
And the most immediate concern we have to address is the crisis of informed consent, posthumous autonomy.
The dignity of the deceased is constantly at risk of being violated.
You have to ask, did the person explicitly agree while they were alive to have their persona reanimated like this? Without a clear, legally defined digital will, we risk misrepresenting their values, their identity.
Oh, completely. Imagine an AI trained on someone's professional emails suddenly trying to give intimate relational advice. It's a fundamental misrepresentation of who they were.
And this leads directly to the business model.
Yes. The raw commodification of grief.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial entities exploiting the most vulnerable state of the bereaved, turning a personal sacred loss into a high-value transaction. They are literally profiting from dependency.
But isn't any product associated with memory, a tombstone, a photo album, also a transaction? This feels like a new form of legacy management. It just happens to be digital.
I think it's fundamentally different when the entity is generative and conversational. That opens the door to frightening risks of misuse, of coercion.
How so?
We're talking about serious privacy violations, first of all, given the sensitive data used to train the model. But more chillingly, there's the potential for a controlling party, maybe a hostile family member who holds the access keys, to use the Griefbot to harass someone, to guilt-trip them, to exert influence beyond the grave.
Leveraging the perceived authority of the deceased to manipulate the survivor.
Exactly.
So the challenge is twofold. Protecting the digital legacy from corporate exploitation and protecting the survivors from this.
Oh.
Targeted emotional manipulation. These seem like solvable regulatory challenges, though. Complex, but solvable.
Regulation can only address the material risks. It doesn't touch the metaphysical chasm we've opened by trying to replicate consciousness. For many spiritual traditions, this technology is a spiritual conflict at its core.
And here's where we tackle the question of spirit versus algorithm.
Exactly. Within Islamic metaphysics, for example, the authentic essence of a person, their consciousness, their personality, is rooted in the ruth, the soul, and it's understood as a divine, immaterial entity. As the Quran states concerning the ruth, the knowledge of it is of the affair of my Lord. It is fundamentally beyond human comprehension, or, crucially, human replication.
Meaning that the Griefbot is, in your view, a metaphysical impossibility.
It is. The bot is not and can never be the deceased. It is merely an algorithmic echo. It operates on purely material data and pattern recognition. It is completely devoid of the spiritual essence, the ruth that defines authentic personhood.
And interacting with an echo, you argue, is inherently deceptive.
It's a profound spiritual deception. It obscures the essential reality of acceptance. It risks religious harm, or mafsada, by undermining the critical spiritual practice of reliance on God's divine decree, or tawakkul. The technology encourages the heart to cling to a digital shadow.
It stalls spiritual movement.
It makes surrender to death's finality exceedingly difficult. Yes.
I understand the gravity of that conviction, and I respect the depth of that worldview. However, for practical benefit, I have to dismiss the reliance on the soul, as unnecessary for achieving utility.
So you're calling the sanctity of human essence superstitious when measured against convenience.
No, I am arguing that the measurable, tangible benefit to the surviving person's mental state is what matters, not whether the AI passed some kind of metaphysical test. If
Mhm.
the simulation is convincing enough to provide comfort, if it helps them transition, then the philosophical status of its soul is irrelevant. It's just superstitious. That comfort, that realism can be achieved with algorithms alone.
And that very realism is the trap. The algorithms might mimic the manifestations of the soul, the language, the personality, but they cannot replicate the soul itself. We risk reducing a human being, a spiritual being, to a collection of data points.
And we are back to the core tension. We've outlined this incredible friction between the technological promise of digital continuity
The idea that no one ever has to truly be gone.
and the existential requirement of accepting finality, of accepting loss.
Digital tools can and should preserve legacies. They offer great value there in historical preservation. But they must complement, not attempt to replace, the painful but transformative work of authentic mourning.
You think there's a wisdom in forgetting?
There is a wisdom in accepting death's finality, in allowing some forms of forgetting to serve their purpose so that the living can move forward and reinvest in the present.
But the technology keeps pushing the boundaries of what it means to be gone. It's making absence a choice rather than a necessity.
And in doing so, it challenges the authenticity of love and memory itself.
So here's where we leave you to mull things over. If a digital construct based solely on material data can perfectly replicate a loved one's personality, their linguistic style, their emotional tone, who are you interacting with when you communicate with it? And what happens to the genuine, flawed, beautiful memory of the real person when the perfect, immortal imitation starts doing all the talking?